we begin, I'd like to read to you out of the Psalms 22:22. It says, I will declare thy name unto my brethren. In the midst of the congregation will I praise thee. So tonight I want to praise God for what he has done in my life and how he has worked miraculously in many situations. My parents separated before I was born. And while my dad was living alone, Mormon missionaries showed up at his door and they shared, I don't know if you've ever spoken with any Mormon missionaries, but they have this beautiful family package that they share of what, God wants for our lives. And they just teach how important family is, and they have like a program for families to be able to grow closer together and with the church family, and they really surround people with love and bring them in. The Mormons are awesome people. I don't know if you know if anybody here knows any Mormons, but I still have family members that are Mormons. They will do anything for you. If you have Mormon neighbors, you have a really good neighbor. Well, my dad was converted as a result of this Bible studies with the Mormons. And he called my mom and wanted reconciliation with my mom. But one stipulation was if they were to get back together that my mom would join the church as well. So she took studies and she became a Mormon. Then I came along, raised in the Mormon Church. My parents divorced at the age of 5, but I continued. I lived with my father and my stepmother, and I continued going to church into my teenage years. As a teenager, I want to share some things about the Mormons. They know how to keep their youth. We could learn many things from the Mormons. They're very organized. They know how to, they do make some compromises though, so I wouldn't recommend everything that they do, but they really know how to keep the youth coming to church. And in what we would get together on Wednesday nights, it was called Mutual. We would come together, and every Mormon church has a gymnasium, and we would have basketball or volleyball, or we go outside sometimes and play kickball, or we would just play games all the time on Wednesday nights. But we would all separate for our classes according to age, and they teach the doctrines during this time. But also one thing they always taught us as young people was the importance of reaching out to the other youth that were not attending. I remember classes, strategies, ideas that were given to me as a teenager to call those friends in church that weren't coming. And I remember doing that. It's almost like the Mormon Church prepared me for evangelism and to reaching out to people outside. I learned a lot of amazing techniques to reach out to people for my faith, and to reach out to missing members as well. And another thing that I felt that was really amazing is that they're so organized. Way back when you would move, if you were ever become a member of the Mormon Church, they will track you. And this was before the internet. You guys, I don't know how they could find me, but they would find me even if I moved out of state. It was really amazing. And I remember one time when I was in my 20s, I was moving out of an apartment into a different apartment, and the lady was with a stroller came rolling up to me looking for me, and she was a Mormon. She wasn't a missionary, but she was a member of the Mormon Church there, and she had found me. And I was moving, and I didn't give her my address. To share some things, when I was a teenager, I did finally leave at the age of 17. For many reasons. I was in a bad group of friends at school. I didn't have the support system at home. By this time I was living with my mom, and she had left the Mormon faith. And so every week on Sunday, every week on Wednesday, members of the church were faithful to pick up me and my brother and sister and take us to church every week. I don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for this upbringing in the church, and they really did teach me to love Jesus. I really, as a child, loved Jesus, loved God. And even though I was taught many wrong doctrine, I was taught the importance of marriage, the importance of family, the importance of a clean life, um, staying away from alcohol and drugs, the importance of serving God. All of these things the Mormons have that teach that are really good. But Mormons believe some really crazy, far out things. So, without further ado, instead of me trying to explain it all, there's a 5-minute animated clip that I don't know if you've ever watched the video Joseph Smith's Temple of Doom. They have an animated clip that this particular producer made of the Mormons' belief system, where it came from, how it started in heaven before God created the earth, between Jesus and Lucifer. Now, I'm sure that's going to spawn all kinds of questions. I was taught this growing up, and if that's all you know and that's what you're taught from those you love and look up to, that you believe it. And I was taught growing up that you could not trust the Word of God, because the Mormons believe also in the great apostasy, like we do in the Catholic Church, but they believe that the Catholic Church has corrupted the Bible and that it is no longer trustworthy, and that is why God had to give Joseph the Book of Mormon to give new light and truth back to the world and set up his God's kingdom again. They teach that the church was taken away. Where we teach the church went into the wilderness, they teach that God removed the church and then brought it back through Joseph Smith. And the story goes that Joseph Smith was praying which church to go to, and then Moroni, the last Nephite that was alive, that the only last one, came to him and told him where the golden plates were. And then he translated them. He received the Urim and the Thummim to translate these golden plates that no one saw. And there's sworn documents of 2 other people seeing them, and one person has revoked that document before his death, that he never saw them. And they just were back in the Hill Cumorah where Joseph Smith found them, and no one ever has seen them since. And so there's a lot of interesting books out there about the Mormons. The God Makers is a really good book if you want to understand, if you have a Mormon family member, if you have a Mormon friend or neighbor that you want to witness to. There's some good books. There's another one written by an Adventist who was a Mormon and became an Adventist, and his name was Leon Cornforth or Cornworth. I'm not sure on that. He's dead now, but he has a book that is beautiful called Reaching the Mormons with Love. And so I've read all these books because I still have Mormons in my family, and it's very, very, very difficult to reach a Mormon with the gospel. And so I want to share my PowerPoint again and show you some. All right. Just show you some things. Mormonism is a veneer. Christianity has a veneer of Christianity. It really is pagan and New Age. If you were to go to the temple in New York, in Salt Lake City, these are pictures of what you would see on the temple. There's the upside down star, the all-seeing eye. Joseph Smith was the highest degree Mason, and he implemented Masonic rituals in the temples that he was told to build. Now, if you go to major cities, there'll be a Mormon temple in about almost all of them now. When I was a child, there wasn't very many, and I went to the one in Washington, D.C. Here's the secret handshake that they have in over one of the doors of the temple. Now, when I was a teenager, it was a great privilege to go baptize for the dead, and so they wanted all the youth to participate in this pagan ritual. And when we went right before we left to go to do this. I broke my foot and I was in a cast and I wasn't able to do the baptism for the dead. And I remember being so bummed out that I couldn't do it because I couldn't get in the tank of water. But what I saw when I went to Washington, D.C., the temple is beautiful. Oh, it's just beautiful to go into there. And I've been told that there isn't a temple built unless they have cash ahead of time or a church. The Mormon people are not in debt. They are very, very savvy and wise and very rich. The temple, you would go into the where the baptismal fount, and this is what it would look like. There would be these bowls that went around the base of it, and this big, huge baptismal fount. And this one doesn't show it; it's low on the ground. The one I went to in Washington D.C., there was a tall ladder that went way up to get into the baptismal fount. And what they told us as kids, that when we would baptize for someone who had died, who was waiting to be able to go on to the next level of godhood. See, Mormons believe that you will too become a Jesus and then save another world. And so you are working your way up to godhood. This what's here on earth is a test to see if you're worthy. And so it's all works oriented. And what you see over here is this was taken off the temple square in Salt Lake City because it brought so much controversy to the church. They removed it. But many people have pictures of it, so it's still available to see in pictures on the internet. This is Adam and Eve kneeling before an altar of fruit and vegetables with a lamb alive and well at the base. So this just shows us the theology of the Mormons right there, and that it just speaks volumes of words of what they teach. And growing up, I used to think, oh, that would be so exciting to have my own world and I would be God like Jesus. And, you just believe it. You think you are the ones with the truth. So, go on with my story. I think, God has his children in every denomination. And I loved God. And I left the church because I got into the wrong group of friends and I was drinking and partying and doing bad things and just not living a godly life. But, being raised a Mormon, I knew all those things were wrong. And I just knew I wasn't living a life that God wanted me to live. Never had peace about it. Never had any peace or happiness in my life. And I was very, very sad. Had a broken family. My mom was an alcoholic, and so just growing up with all of this around me, I didn't have the nice Mormon family. I'll tell you what, if you grow up in a Mormon family that is tight-knit and goes to church and really follows the teachings of the church, it's very, very hard to reach them. And to leave would be like you died in the Mormon faith. My sister, the only reason I still have a relationship with my sister, who is the only Mormon that's left in my family, is because she's trying to convert me back. My dad, who brought the Mormon faith to the family, before he died 2 years ago, my husband was able to baptize him into the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And my sister, bless her heart, she was so angry with me. And told me that she was so mad at my dad because he's the one that brought the truth to our family, and here he left it. And, I didn't want to argue with my sister. My sister loves God, and she's a very good person. And, we have conversations, but it's difficult because, of her beliefs and my beliefs. But I pray for her daily and pray for all my other siblings have left. My mom has left. My mom is a born-again Christian, and she's even watching Doug Batchelor, and she watched It Is Written, The Hope Awakens. She watched the whole thing, and my mom hasn't joined the Adventist faith, but she really believes a lot of what we believe. So back to my story. I'm about 20 at this point, 21 almost. I live next door to a health food store, and I used to walk to work every day in town. It was just a few blocks away at the hospital where I worked. No, I wasn't at the hospital yet. I worked at a food stamp office. Crazy job. And I would walk by, and the man who owned the health food store would sit out on the step of his store, and they lived above it. He talked to me as I walked by. He was very friendly. And he asked me one day if I needed a part-time job. And I said, in fact, I do. You could tell that I needed a car. I was walking. And anyway, they invited me in to work in the health food store to put bulk food in smaller bags and label them, and then I babysit their kids, and they invite me upstairs to eat with them for dinner, and it was the first introduction to analogs and health food, and I didn't mind it. I really didn't mind that food at all. In fact, I thought it was good, and I enjoyed them, and they gave me the book Cosmic Conflict. And also they invited me to play on their church volleyball team, and I love volleyball. And so I got to know the members of the church. They just were my friends. But then, I never went to church or anything. And every time I tried to read the book Cosmic Conflict, the way she handed it to me, she said, "This is a book about good and evil and how good triumphs." And it always seemed very interesting. I was an avid reader, avid novel reader, but every time I tried to open that book up to read it, it just was like, whew, whew, going over my head. But I always believed that I needed to read the book, and I put it in my nightstand. About a year and a half later, I get a call I had put out applications to new jobs because my job at food stamp office was nuts, and I needed a new job. And so I put in applications, and I get a call from LaPorte Hospital for a job interview as a secretary to the director of the respiratory and cardiac departments of the hospital. Of course, that was Steve. And right in the job interview, I went home, and I told my roommate, "I'm going to marry this man." And she thought I was nuts. But I just knew. After the interview, we spoke for another 4 hours, and we just talked. And I'll just never believe the connection that Steve and I had in this as we talked. And we both were so tired of the dating scene. We were so tired of Steve was a backslidden Adventist, so tired of the bar scene, so tired of our lives. And we just talked about, that we needed God. We both did. And he said I was the first girl that, since his divorce that he had met that really had a love for God. And, he had left the church over a lot of circumstances, but, he still believed, and he knew the truth. We were together a year dating, and he took me to a very expensive restaurant and took me on a horse and buggy ride. I really thought tonight was the night he was going to ask me to marry him, and he didn't. And as the evening went on, I began to cry, and he's looking at me like, "What is the matter? We're having a great evening. Why are you crying?" And I said, "I thought you were going to ask me to marry you." And he said, "Honey, I can't marry you. I love you, but I can't." And I said, "What do you mean? You love me and you can't?" I don't understand. And he said, "Because you're a Mormon and I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I will always be a Seventh-day Adventist." And I said, "That's okay. We can make it work." He says, "You don't have any idea. No, it won't work. We're unequally yoked." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, if we were to get married and have children, they'd have to be raised Adventists." I was like ready to sign on the dotted line. "Sure, that's fine. They'd have to go to Adventist schools. That's fine. No problem." He says, "Honey, you don't know what that means." And he goes, "I tell you what, why don't we do this? Let's study each other's religion, and we'll make a decision, and whatever one we think is right, we will join that church." I was thrilled. I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And, he was so wise. He didn't say, "I'm right, you're wrong." He just said, "Let's see which one is right." My husband's very wise. I was just all down for it. So we invited the Mormon missionaries and the Adventist pastor over. And, after a couple studies, we took a trip to Milwaukee Zoo. I thought for sure we were going to be this happy little Mormon family, right? Living that Mormon dream that I believed was right. On the way, as we left to go to Milwaukee, we lived in Indiana at the time. We were taking a trip up to Milwaukee to the zoo. He said, "Grab a book to read to me in the car." You guys, in the midst of studying with the Mormons and the Adventist pastor, of course, separate nights, not the same time, I grabbed the Cosmic Conflict that was in my nightstand. I didn't know what I had. Steve didn't know I had it. neither one knew what that, and he didn't recognize the book. He just saw cosmic conflict. He'd been out of the church long enough that he didn't see the Great Controversy packaged that way. So as I began to read, he realized I was reading the Great Controversy. And he told me, Cindy, this is too heavy for you. This book is too much. If you want an Adventist book, he says, where did you get that book? And I said, well, from my neighbors that were, members that ran the health food store. And he was like, oh, honey, this is a heavy book. And no, this isn't the right book for you to read. I'll get you another book. I was like, no, what? No, I want to read this. What are you hiding? And by the time I got to the 3rd chapter on the era of spiritual darkness, I couldn't put the book down. And I was in such shock by what I was reading. And I kept saying to Steve, is this true? Did this really happen? How could the whole Christian world be wrong and be worshiping God on the wrong day? I was just astounded by it all. And I said, Steve, I grew up as a Mormon and we called Sunday Sabbath. We kept Sabbath. We didn't go to the store. The TV was off. We did family things. We went in nature. We kept the Sabbath on Sunday. And I said, Sunday's the 7th day. And he goes, Cindy, have you looked at a calendar? And I was just like, what? What? I was so amazed. I couldn't put the book down all weekend long. All I could do was read the book. And when the Mormon missionaries came back that next week to study with us, I introduced to them the Sabbath. I gave them a Great Controversy. I don't know where I got it, probably from the Adventist pastor, but I gave the Mormon missionaries the book. And I told them about everything, and they were like, and I said, if you could prove to me Sunday is the Sabbath from the Bible, I will be in church next Sunday. And they were thrilled. They were just like, oh, we're not ready to do that, but we can. They never came back. They never came back. Well, I continued studying with the Adventists. And, I just fell in love with Jesus all over. And we got married. I was baptized. We both were, we were both rebaptized because I was baptized in the Mormon faith. So we were both rebaptized. And a year later, I was working at the hospital where I worked, and Mormon missionary girls walk by my desk, and I can point out Mormon missionaries wherever I am. I know when I see them. You probably do too. And I said, are you guys Mormon missionaries? And they said, yes, we are. And I said, I used to be. And I began to tell them the story of what happened, how I left the Mormon faith. And their mouths just dropped to the floor. And they said, oh, you created a controversy in our church. And I said, I never went to your church. No, you're mistaking me with someone else. Oh no, it was you. You gave the book to the Mormon missionary, and he began convicted on the Sabbath, and he began teaching it in the Mormon church, and it split the church. No wonder they didn't come back. I don't know whatever happened. I never found out. They said they sent that missionary home from his mission. Missionaries are young boys. They're like 18, 19 years old. He was sent home. I pray for that man, that young man, quite often, because I don't know what ever happened there, but to leave the Mormon faith, you will be shunned. It'll be as if you died. But you know what, you guys? I gave my life to Christ again. I began to embrace what I was learning, and it's been the best decision of my life. I could never turn back, and he called Steve and I into full-time ministry, and I have never been just blown away by what God did to help me see truth, and how wise my husband was to help me see it, and to bring me into this beautiful message of the 3 angels, and now being a full-time Bible worker. I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. It's just been so exciting, and I just praise God, and I pray that I've uplifted him, and I thank him so much for what he's done for me.